Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney save. Today we are going to be working on a restaurant. This is called Eve's Terrarium and it's going to be located in Evergreen Harbor. So the actual lot that you are currently seeing me build on, at the end of the video, this build does get moved to a different section of Evergreen. So don't get too attached to this location, and if you're a little bit worried about where I'm currently building, don't worry, I did decide to move it. At the beginning, I really struggled with the idea of what I wanted this build to be. So I knew I wanted a restaurant in Evergreen Harbor, and I knew I wanted it to be either themed after Eve herself from WALL-E or WALL-E himself. So first I ran a poll on Patreon, kind of asking my patrons what they liked better as far as an idea. Because basically, the two ideas were to do a restaurant based after Eve that is very sleek, white, clean, futuristic, eco-friendly, probably has a vegetarian-based diet, all of the things that really encompass her character. And then the other idea was to basically do the opposite of that and do a very dirty, messy, run-down, cubed kind of fast food place, maybe like drink in a cup or meal in a cup kind of a restaurant that you could go get cheap, kind of grimy food. And I think the second idea might have fit in this particular neighborhood a little bit more, but I wasn't really intimidated at the idea of doing something very futuristic, even in the corner of this like sort of residential, because Evergreen Harbor is very much based around the idea that like you can clean it up and make it however you want to be. I really like the idea that certain portions of the neighborhood are starting to become more innovative and futuristic and just progressive in general and working towards being more of those things. So maybe where this lot originally could have served as back in the day a residential, and then it gets turned into like a community park, and now it's becoming a very eco-friendly and clean, sustainable restaurant. That idea really felt like it worked for me. But I was struggling with this build on a level that I haven't struggled with a build in a long time. In fact, I did almost get rid of it entirely. I had built probably 3 or 4 shells even before the first one that you guys saw on screen, and it was already started to like, I had already basically built the exterior because I just went through so many different building types that I wasn't really happy with, and I landed on the final one that, again, once I was done with it, I even like completely did the interior, and I really just didn't like it. I was considering scrapping the entire idea. I went to my private Discord and was chatting and was like, I might get rid of this. And basically, we talked about like what Eve herself looks like. And I think that is what ultimately the problem was, because I really wanted this restaurant that felt very much like an embodiment of her. And when you think about Eve as a character, she's a robot. She's white. She's got a very sleek look, very minimalistic. And then the only 2 other colors or things at play are that she's very curvy, she's very round, she is futuristic in the fact that she's like 700 plus years old from modern Earth, and she floats, and she's got these blue eyes that work on kind of like a grid pixel system to show her expression. And the original shells for the building, I think, were way too angular and really felt like something that in general was futuristic, but didn't really embody Eve as a character and didn't feel like a good enough tie-in for WALL-E. Because my problem with it was that I was worried it looked too much like a generic restaurant that could be a part of literally anyone's save. And that's not really the point of the Disney save. Every lot, even ones that I design, and aren't based after ones that are from a movie or like a park or something like that, they still have to feel very Disney-esque and capture the essence of either the character or the movie that I am trying to depict. So my first WALL-E build for Evergreen Harbor was the Lido deck, and I do recommend that you go and check that one out if this one happens to be your first of the WALL-E builds or just my Disney builds in general. That one I was super happy with. As soon as I finished it, it looked just like the reference that I was using. I was just happy with how it turned out. But this one, it just didn't feel right. Like nothing was feeling right. So I basically went in and started to renovate my original lot, which is kind of what you guys are seeing here as far as the process goes. I felt like we needed a little bit of a reno. So even though this isn't your typical speed build for me, normally they're very linear. We start with nothing and we end up with something. This one's going to jump all over the place quite a bit. I started with a shell that I wasn't happy with and almost got rid of, and then we're going to renovate it to make it into something that I feel like can proudly stand in the Disney save with a lot of the other things that I have put into this game so far. The other thing that I think I was struggling with quite a bit was the interior, and I'm happy with how it turned out at the end. I did get the idea to add like a basement. The shape was just so awkward, and I was trying to figure out, how do you place bathrooms when you have so much glass going on? Where do you put the chef station that I hate, by the way? I wish they gave us like a few more, some that are more sleek and modern, and you need them for restaurants. I just wish we could get like maybe a new version of that. Nevertheless, it has to be included to have like a functioning restaurant. And then I also struggled quite a bit with the name. The name was driving me crazy for this place. And I went to Patreon, I went to Discord, I was all over the place. I just really didn't know what I wanted this name to be. I had like an idea from the beginning that I was kind of happy with. And then the more I thought about it, the more another name started to seem really good. And names can always really be a struggle. So usually what we'll do is we will go through music from the movie and pick out some kind of a reference from the music. And that is a pretty good way that we have used up until this point when it comes to naming lots. But WALL-E is a very interesting film in the fact that it doesn't have a ton of dialogue, and some of the songs are completely instrumental with like no lyrics, nothing that, even as like a big fan of the movie, when I was thinking back on it, nothing in reference that I could come up with as like a phrase that might be recognizable that I could name this place. And I also really wanted it to be super clear that if you looked at this place and you weren't sure what it was based on or any of that stuff, what kind of a restaurant does it look like? The menu for this place is 100% vegetarian safe. It is completely plant-based, and then we have a few futuristic, spacey, some of that like weird alien food or things that The Sims has come up with that I literally just couldn't identify, and I was like, might be from space, so we're gonna throw it in on the menu. And it makes it interesting and unique in that kind of a way. So I definitely wanted the name itself to represent that idea. And originally in my head I was calling this The Last Plant because of the plant from the movie, the one that is so important, but it isn't technically the last plant. In fact, it's not even like the first one. When they are zooming out on like the final scene of WALL-E, you see that there are more plants forming on the planet. So even though in the movie they feel like it's the last plant, it really isn't. And so I was a little bit nervous about using that idea, and I was bouncing it around in Discord, and I think that other people were also kind of like, maybe we could come up with something a little bit better. So we ended up doing Eve's Terrarium, which was a name picked out by one of my patrons. I am not clever when it comes to naming and stuff like that. I literally I'm clueless, which is why we picked names out from movies or just directly like what their name is depending on what movie they come from. And what we ended up with is this really sleek, very futuristic, clean, white, beautiful building that I am very, very happy with, and I think does represent Eve very well. It's got lots of curves like she does. We've got the clean white elements going on. We do have her terrarium, her dome that has plants in it, and really I didn't use too many other plants in this build. Like originally I was doing lots of plants on the interior, and I ended up taking them all away and replacing them with a lot of like glowing objects because of Eve and her eyes. And even when you get some of those like zoomed in scenes of her expressing emotion, they will show like the pixels in her eyes like kind of forming to give her more emotion overall across the board. So we do have quite a few items in the game that are either glowing or like blue, and I thought it would help make the build itself look very futuristic, and also kind of another shout out to Eve herself. Now, in a few moments here, we will be jumping to a new lot, which is where the build is actually going to reside. And it's in Port Promise, down closer to the Lido deck, where that area is basically going to become the WALL-E section of this world. So I am doing a home for WALL-E, and I am doing a home for Eve. They will probably live separate of one another because they just have such different aesthetics and I really like the idea that you might be able to play them romantically if you wanted to like combine the characters together. And I will be translating their characters over into Sims. I am very excited to do so. So there was one lot in the Port Promise area that wasn't going to end up being a Wally themed lot, and instead I've just flip-flopped them. So this lot got moved into Port Promise, and then the lot that was originally going to be there got moved to the lot that you are previously seeing. So we moved this over to like the abandoned train station area, and one of my other patrons had the idea to bring some of Walt's lore into the Disney save a little bit more, because Walt Disney does reside in Evergreen Harbor, and I depicted him as sort of like the decision maker and person who watches over not just Evergreen Harbor but all of the worlds and gets to make decisions regarding like pretty much anything. And Walt himself has always been shown as being very creative, innovative, imaginative, always leaning towards the future. So I think that he would probably really like to make buildings and approve plans for buildings that are sort of leaning towards that idea, especially design-wise and concept. So even though the surrounding area hasn't really caught up to the future aspect of what these builds look like, being the Lido deck and this one, they're very futuristic looking, and compared to like the outside exterior world, they don't really match one another, but it's sort of the first steps for Evergreen Harbor towards the future, very much led by Walt and his ideas of like the future and progressiveness and all of that. So he's definitely got his hands full in on this restaurant, a project of love for him. He will not be the owner. I don't think I'm going to give this restaurant to anyone. Eve is actually going to have other things to do, and I don't think that cooking and like restaurant ownership necessarily describes her character super well. So she's going to have a different role that I will explain a little bit better when we actually do her Creative Sim video. But this does still give a little bit of backstory as far as maybe why Port Promise in my save file is starting to look a little bit more futuristic compared to what was originally there when you first get the game. Because when you first get the game, it is just shipping containers everywhere, a little bit of dirty, a little bit of messy, and it is definitely in need of some repair. So this is kind of post-help, and Walt Disney himself actually having a big portion of his personal help into helping with moving the world forward. And I think that's pretty cool. Now we are on to the interior, which again, definitely a struggle because we just have so little room in here. And then we've got this large roof piece that is coming over the top of the build that does create a little bit of obstruction for not only Sims, but just me visually when I'm trying to decorate. And then the whole thing is glass. So I was trying to come up with, where do I put the bathroom? Where do I put the kitchen that this doesn't look awkward? So I did build one really small basement, and that is where the kitchen actually is. And then you'll notice that I moved the stairs out onto a second patio that goes off of the back of the building. And those stairs kind of zigzag all the way up to the top, which is how the staff are going to be getting in and out of these rooms. I think that that's really cool too, because it kind of creates a sense of privacy when you are dining here. You will get the experience of just being in like a very glass but also confined sort of dining space, and you won't have like too many other people walking around. I didn't really want the patios to be extra seating. I wanted to keep those cubes out there, and those cubes don't really serve well as like dining tables. I think they might be end tables or chairs. I don't even remember, but I just know that I wanted the cubes, and the cubes basically meant that we weren't going to be able to dine on the patios. However, given the Sims, I'm sure your Sims will get up and go out there and probably eat some food. And if you want that experience, but maybe you don't care for the table, then there you go. You can sit out there if you would like to. But mostly, it's kind of a small dining. We have a very few seating in here. It is sort of high priority, and it does look very formal, but it's not. It's just so futuristic that it feels that way. I think I set the attire to like party wear. It's supposed to be fun, thematic, something that would be a little bit different. If you think about the restaurants that I've built for the save so far, we have Tiana's and Tiana's Palace that are both very formal, very like Louisiana Southern cuisine, very elegant, formal wear, like required. Then we have Duke's, and Duke's is more of like a restaurant for breakfast only. And I think the menu is pretty much only breakfast. So you could go there casually. And obviously it's more of a diner, so you could go at any point in time during the day. But it serves more in my head as like a breakfast if you were going to go get a meal like first thing in the morning. And that might be it for restaurants, and even for Willow Creek, that was quite a bit. So I knew I wasn't going to do too many in Evergreen, if any at all. But I do think maybe one, if you were just going to stick within the world and you weren't really going to play outside of the world, you might want one restaurant to go to. So this is going to be our one. And yeah, even though it feels very big and it has a lot of space to it, a lot of it is just for show. The area around the back is basically for staff. The patio is not really for dining. And there's a patio out in front with the terrarium that, again, I really didn't want to make it a dining area. I could have put like little umbrellas out there and stuff, and I really just didn't want to include any of that stuff. I wanted it to be exclusively in-house and kind of cozy in that way. Lastly, for these videos, when I do a restaurant, I like to include the menu so you guys can see, and the short create a sim of what the waiters and waitresses will wear, and the chefs. I really struggled mostly with the chefs because we don't have too many chefs outfits. In fact, we might only have like 2, and I didn't want all of my restaurants to use the same chef outfit, but I wanted to be very clear who is the chef. So I ended up using a lot of like the dine out stuff. One of the dine out colors that was available in all of the swatches was this like teal blue color. So that's pretty much what we're going to use across the board. And I think obviously for future restaurants where we can do some more like cartoon cheesy feeling type of attire, I could get away with some really cool stuff. Like there is one robot costume that we have, and I did consider giving that to like the waiters or the host or something, but there isn't sense of elegance to this place, even though, like I said, it's not supposed to be formal, and there definitely is like more of a party element to this place. I didn't want it to get too cheesy with like the costume wear. It's not themed in that way. It's just themed in like a very elegant, sleek kind of way. So instead, we just have more minimalistic looks for the waiting staff. And I think that that definitely fits in with the vibe. I do want to address the bathroom really quickly because I know I'm going to get comments on this and people are going to just think it's funny, whatever. But the bathroom was just a tricky situation in general. I didn't want to put it in the basement because then your Sim's got to go all the way down there to use it. So I did tuck it kind of into the back of the roof. And the windows are glass, and that's just for the aesthetic purposes. And I know people, you're going to be like, in real life, that would never happen. We were not going to have floor to ceiling glass windows in the bathroom of the restaurant, but it's frosted glass, okay? We've got the blue frosted glass, and that's going to be the protection that you need. That's fine. That works for me. So that's how we're keeping it. I usually will go more for like the aesthetic versus the realisticness of the build. Like if something is slightly unrealistic, but it just makes it look a little bit cooler, I'll probably pick that every single time. So hopefully it doesn't bother too many of you, but I did want to address it because I know people are just going to have a field day with it. And yeah, we're just finishing out the outfits here for the waitstaff. They basically all match one another. They're all wearing a pop of blue with some white and black, which obviously is meant to represent Eve herself. And again, I think if we had had like maybe some more futuristic clothing, I might have done that for the waitstaff, but I am actually waiting to see what the new pack is going to be and kind of deciding around the idea of that because it might be super futuristic with some of the hints that we've gotten so far. And if I can put a restaurant there and that kind of a deal, I didn't want to take away from that idea possibly being able to do in the future. So rather than that, we're going to go with something more modest and clean, which I think represents the build well. And that is going to be the end of today's video. So sorry that it was a little bit scrambled, and it is raining, so if you hear that in the background, again, I apologize. But I hope you guys enjoyed anyway. Let me know what you thought of the build down in the comment section below. If you would like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link down in my description box below or the link at the end of the video. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Hit that little bell icon below to turn on post notifications so you can get updated every single time I post, and I will talk to you all in the next one.